And the idea now is to farm the oceans. So the way that the solution that I see ahead of us is farming the oceans, because the oceans cover 70% of the planet and they are barely being used. And what we have been using, we have been depleting and exhausting, right? So now I'll show you what can be done in the oceans and to farm floating sargassum in the subtropical gyres by bringing up nutrient-rich deep water through artificial upwelling. And of course, we would have to add iron as well, right? But that's not a big problem because, as I said, the planet is an iron planet and there's huge amounts of iron available for fertilizing the ocean. So that is absolutely no issue. Now, this shows you the productivity of the ocean. The blue areas are the areas that are very impoverished. These are the deserts of the ocean, not the blue areas. They're called subtropical gyres, right? And here the subtropical gyres. And the green, of course, is vegetation on land, and the brown are the deserts. And you see that India is kind of half and half, and it has a very mixed future ahead of us in India. But what I'm going to concentrate now are these huge ocean spaces, particularly in the South Pacific and the South Indian Ocean, that are not being used, and they can be put to use.
So, Professor Victor,
yes?
We have an interesting question. I think it is directly on the
please
time.
Keep interrupting. I enjoy that. Yes, go on.
Yeah. So there is a question from Hansika that is asking how much of carbon will be cut after growing sargassum in the following years?
Yeah, I'm going to come to that. That's
okay, so I think people are getting really impatient to really listen to this topic.
All right. Okay. So here you see the subtropical gyres. These are these red areas here, and they are impoverished. Now, in the North Atlantic, we have what is known as the Sargasso Sea. And this has always been there. So when Columbus crossed the Atlantic to get to America, he crossed the Sargasso Sea. And the Sargasso Sea are these macroalgae that float on the surface. You see them up here in the right-hand corner. I'll show them more clearly. So this is the only ocean that has the sargassum floating on the surface. This is what it looks like. This is a seaweed. We also have it in India on the coasts, right? But not much. But this is what I'm saying is going to save the planet when we grow them. So here you see these fish hiding in the sargassum, right? So the sargassum is a natural floating seaweed that occurs in the oceans and is limited by the amount of nutrients available to it. Because these are deserts, as I told you. They're deserts because that water has been at the surface for so long that the nutrients have all sunk out. And this is sargassum floating in the water. Now, here you see here's a line of sargassum. Now, these are sargassum rafts. And when you take them out, you get this is what they look like, right? And then they also sink and they land up on the sediment. Here you see them on the sediment. And so when sargassum grows on the surface, it takes up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then it leads to a deficit in the water, so that CO2 is then taken up. And when the sargassum sinks out and lands on the surface, it's taken that carbon with it and transported it to the deep ocean. Okay. Now, this is a section through the Atlantic, right? From north to south. Here you see the section. And what you see over here is that these violet areas in the top, these are the subtropical gyres. And you can see from the scale here, this is the scale for nitrate. Nitrate is a plant nutrient. That there's absolutely no nitrate in the surface layers of these gyres, but there's a huge amount just below it. A few hundred meters below the surface, there are huge concentrations of nitrate. So if we want to get these ocean deserts blossoming with sargassum, we have to bring this water up from depth through tubes, through pipes, right? Yeah. Now, I'll also point out here that under these subtropical gyres, you also have oxygen deficient layers. You might have heard of the dead zones in the ocean people are warning about. So I'm going to also tell you about what the negative effects are of what I'm going to do, what might be negative effects, and that we can counteract them. We can take care of all these things. It's possible, right? So these are the oxygen depleted zones under these oceans. And I can explain why, but not now. I mean, I can explain all this stuff later on. If there's interest, I can give more talks later on. That's my field. I'm an oceanographer. All right, so this is what the Sargassum looks like. This is, of course, an
Victor,
artist.
do you have small time for one or two questions that
Yes,
we are getting? Yeah.
This is.
So there is a question from Gauri Shankar, or let's say comment that the trend is throwing the fish waste into sea back while processing the fish direct after the catch. Is it favorable to reduce carbon count? Your comment, please.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You see, the thing is that fishermen all over the world, they only take fish out of the ocean. They don't put anything back. It's totally unsustainable. The kind of fishing that we have been doing up to now is like that. But the amount is too little, right? The amount is too little. So let me go back to this slide, this biomass slide I showed you. I have to scroll back. I'm sorry. Here, right? So the total amount of fish is 0.7 gigatons in the ocean. We have to take out like 5 or 6 gigatons of carbon dioxide a year to make a difference. So it would not be bad to put some of that fish, the waste, back into the ocean, but it's not going to have any effect. It's far too little. But the thinking is correct. You know, like we do on land, you know, we eat land plants and then we excrete back into the soil. And so we have a cycle, we maintain a cycle. And that cycle is disrupted in the ocean. That's true. So no, it would be good to do it, but it would not be enough.
And there is also additional comment from Kapil Kumar from Belgium. He's saying that yes, population of the world is also increasing. So that is also another dimension of issue that we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, so food security. So food security is a very big issue. And carbon dioxide, the climate is also a big issue. But what I'm explaining to you, making these sargassum farms in the ocean is going to solve all these problems at the same time. Sounds too good to be true. That's not my fault. I can't help it. That's the way it is. But of course, what we have to do is we have to build a lot of infrastructure. We have to bring infrastructure into the ocean. So how did I land up with the sargassum? I was asked to write a paper.
So Victor, just one more second, please. So we have a question from Gurukul Vidyapit. So I request to unmute yourself so you can ask your question. So I have requested to unmute. So please go ahead with your question because he would like to put himself. So please.
Okay, sir. Myself, Rajan Sinha, and I want to ask you, there are a number of people, how we can influence in how many ways that we can overcome the effects of releasing of CO2. That is very challenging for all of us. Yeah,
of course. The solution is fairly straightforward. We just have to make a lot more renewable energy facilities, right? Solar panels. I mean, if we were to plaster the Indian cities with solar panels, that would make a big difference. We just have to put much more of this kind of thing. And in the cooler countries like in Germany, windmills, the wind farms, wind generators, they're putting out more and more wind generators and also going offshore, right? That is how to solve the problem.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, but then you see the problem is that if you reduce the output of CO2, that's not going to solve the climate crisis. The climate crisis is caused by the carbon dioxide that is already in the atmosphere, and that is not going to go away because it's the remnant CO2 in the atmosphere is the result of equilibrium reactions with natural sinks, with the ocean and with the biomass, like I explained. So unless we do something actively to remove carbon dioxide from the air, we're finished. We're going to just continue melting the ice caps because that's not going to stop, even if we reduce emissions. Obviously, we have to reduce emissions so that then when we start removing CO2, we don't have that problem that we also adding stuff. You know, we are like a ship that has sprung a leak, has a leak and there's water entering the ship. And that ship is now beginning to sink, right? It's kind of crooked. So obviously, we have to pump water out of the ship, but we also have to stop the leak. But we can't say that we will first stop the leak before we take CO2 out or pump the water out. We have to do both at the same time. So we have to remove carbon dioxide, but we also have to stop adding new carbon dioxide. And that's
I think this really helps to understand the view. So thank you very much, Victor. So considering the time, I think I would just like to
move on. Yeah.
Yeah. Raise just one question. Maybe keep in mind there is a question from Hansika Anand that is there any other techniques other than sargassum that can be used as a carbon absorbent? So I would request that first we move to this nice, fancy or interesting thing about the sargassum, and then maybe at the end you give some comment on it that what are the other possibilities.
Yeah. Okay, I don't have enough time. I'm sorry, but I have to. But of course, there's a lot that can be done, right? Sargassum, but for me, sargassum is the most hopeful, right? And why? Because we had this proliferation of sargassum. This is satellite images, right? This is North and South America, Africa here, and you see that we had since that 2011 huge amount of sargassum growing in the Atlantic, and that is what gave me hope that the sargassum grows very rapidly if it gets nutrients. Right, and then this is what it looks like. Now you've seen the sargassum, but it's landing on the beaches. So this is the main negative thing about sargassum is that it can land on the beaches. But if we are making use of it, then we won't let that happen. We will capture it beforehand and sink it. Now, how to grow the sargassum? To do the sargassum, we need to have pipes that connect deep water with surface water, and these pipes. These double pipes, this was started by an oceanographer called Stommel in 1956. He came up with this idea. And since then, we have been improving on it. So what happens is that you have this very low nutrient water at the surface, and you have very high nutrient water at depth, a couple of 100 meters lower down. And the water at the top is very warm, but it's also very salty. It's salty because it has been evaporating the water, right? When you have evaporation, you leave salt behind, but that water is also warm. So you have warm, salty water at the top, and you have cold, less salty water in the bottom, and you have nutrients in the bottom and not at the top. Now, if you connect the two with a double pipe, as shown over here, right? These are engineered diagrams. They have not yet been made. These pipes have not yet been made, but this is just the theory. So if you connect the two, and you take warm salty water down to warm the cold, less salty water at the base to bring it up, you can set up a flow, a gravity flow, that will, once you start it, will flow forever. This is a rough sketch of how it will function. You have a pipe, a double pipe that extends from the top to the bottom. These are engineering problems. And you have a density flow that is started by warming and cooling, like cooling surface water and warming deep water. And then this counteracting flow brings nutrients to the surface. You have to install them. These are like irrigation canals, right? An irrigation canal takes a lot of work to build. You have to dig a lot, you have to do a lot of infrastructure and so on. But once the thing is up there and moving, then the flow of water from the river higher up continues as long as there's water in that river.
And this is exactly the engineering problem that we were discussing for the last couple of years with Victor, how to solve it.
Right. So we have to make these pipes, right? And here's one of these pipes. And these are vertical pipes. They're about 400 meters long. They are 400 meters deep, and we will need a lot of these pipes, but then we can grow a lot of sargassum. Right, so this has already been tested. This is just to show you some papers, where new artificial upwelling of deep sea water. So, but this is very rudimentary. What we want to do is take it much further. We're much more active. Now, this has happened in the past also, right? The planet has cooled over the last 50 million years. The planet has been cooling, and it has been cooled by what is known as duckweed, a plant that grows on the surface like sargassum. Here you see sargassum. And here's this water hyacinth that is a pest in many parts of the tropics, because these plants grow very, very fast. These plants that are floating in the water grow much faster than plants that have roots in the soil, because they don't have to make those roots, right? Because they are already in the water, nutrient-rich water. And this is this azolla, it's called. And this azolla, this is a fossil azolla, and these are modern azollas. It's called duckweed, and you find it floating on water. Everywhere you see that, all over India, in the geels and lakes that have a lot of nutrients in them. You see this green stuff floating on the top. And this can be all cultivated to grow fast, right? And this is what it looks like. And this has cooled the planet already. You can check this on the Azolla event. Oh, sorry, this is the German one. But you can type Azolla event in Google, and then you'll get this. So this has already happened in the past. We have already cooled the planet with this floating. It's not a seaweed; it's a fern, but you can do that. So this is what I'm anticipating, that we will then, when we start moving to the open ocean, we have these pipes that are bringing nutrient-rich water up. And then we have farms. We establish farms on the surface. And these farms will have photovoltaic cells for generating electricity. But the flow of water will be by itself. We don't need energy for that. We just have to make the pipes, install them, put them in place, and move on from there.
So we have a very interesting question, Victor, very practical question that from Kapil Kumar from Belgium. What to do every ordinary person in India to join this mission?
Yeah, listen to and agree with it and then join. Yeah. Now here we have one person in the audience, Richard Wills. So they have formed a company called Seafields, seafields.eco. It's already on the web. That homepage is just being constructed. So it's not perfect, but this company is exactly doing making these pipes. And we had a long discussion just on Friday, where we discussed the mathematics of how to optimize these pipes, right? How to optimize the ratio of cold and warm water coming and going up and down. So what we need to do now is we need to move to the open ocean and start not colonizing. I'm not saying that the people are going to live there permanently, right? But work there, grow these farms, make aqua farms, but there's more of it coming.
So for the normal people, it would be like to join hand and make the awareness so that we get more funding, more people, bigger organization, and bigger, let's say, fund would pump in to solve this mega problem. So we are in that stage, let's say.
Yeah, you just said that's it. That's why Gautam asked me to give this talk, right? So what I'm proposing is planting plankton trees in the ocean's deserts, right? These will be vertical pipes with umbrella-like horizontal branches on the surface that pump up deep nutrient-rich water using local energy sources to fertilize fields of floating sargassum. We would need a large number of pipes, but these pipes could be made out of sargassum raw material. The sargassum biomass is already being exploited for alternative plastics, right? So what I envisioned is that we will have ships on site that will be making these pipes with new forms of manufacturing that we can't even think of now at the moment. But in 5, 10, 15 years, if we put emphasis and action on this, we can do that, right? And establish these plankton oases. They would be located on the eastern sides of the gyres. They would generate ample seafood because we will be growing fish there as well. Sargassum is a very beneficial, benevolent plant. It attracts fish, so we will have seafood. We will also have raw material. And as I said, it's an alternative to plastics. And it would be, you could collect the sargassum, compress it into bales, and store it on the deep sea floor. And these dumps would reduce ocean acidification, but also the oxygen demand, because people are always worried about doing anything in the ocean. Oh my God, you shouldn't do this, and so on and so forth. But this all is not going to be a big problem because we would be using just about 1 or 2% of the area of the subtropical gyres and to do all this, right? And then here you see what can be made out of seaweeds. Now, these are all the many uses. Now I've lost my, I'm rushing now because of the time. Now we need to have some more discussion after this. So this is just to give you a feeling for what can be made out of the sargassum as well. So this would take pressure off the land. It would take pressure off the coastal systems, because we would move our activity from the land and from the coastal ocean to the open ocean. And
so Victor, can you give just one comment? Like if we talk about comparing with the normal plants on the land, how more effective the sargassum is?
Okay, so the doubling rates of sargassum are, if you give sargassum enough nutrients and space for light, they can double the biomass every 10 days. So if you start off with 1 ton of sargassum, right, and this is exponential, if you start off with 1 ton of sargassum, at the end of a year, you have 10 billion tons of sargassum.
And do we have some data that what would be the situation with our normal plant or trees if you do? I think will be far less.
I mean, they double double biomass in a year, no?
Okay, so this is just a great comparison. One is doubling in 1 week, more or less, 10 days, and the tree is doubling in 1 year. So this is what gives an impression that how far effective it could be. Thank you.
Well, of course, I mean, rice and so on, that's faster. But still, it's nothing like, it just doesn't compare to what floating plants that are taking their nutrients directly from the water and putting it straight into the chloroplasts, what kind of doubling rates they have.
So it means that it will be also consuming a lot more CO2 in a much less time than the plant. Yes. So we can win the race of producing the CO2 versus what we have put already in the system.
Exactly. And then again, I see also breeding programs. There are all these new techniques for improving plants and so on, where we can even increase that.
Yeah, please.
If we target it, right?
Yeah,
thank you. So what we would be doing now is, after over-exploiting the wild stocks in the ocean, the logical next step is a transition from hunter-gatherer to real aquaculture in the open ocean, right? Which would produce huge amounts of high-quality, uncontaminated seafood from seaweeds, and ranging from seaweed to crustacea to fish. I'm not saying that we have to eat the seaweed, but even then, I think that we have enough creative cooks in India to make a good tarkari out of seaweed, right?
Yeah.
And in Japan, they're eaten extensively, right? So, and in India, they don't, but we could start that also, right? It's very healthy, right? And then, like any natural desert ecosystem, once the pipe flow of nutrients is stopped, then you get the desert back. You stop the irrigation, you get the old system back. So that's not a problem, right? And what we have to add is iron. And so establishing the optimal network of upwelling pipes is an engineering challenge that can be met by advances in material sciences, synthetic biology, modern manufacturing, etc. Right? And seaweed farming is the logical next evolutionary development of Homo sapiens, of humans. Right? And there would also be a net transfer of phosphate, because all the nutrients are there. The only thing we have to add is iron in trace amounts, milligrams per square meter. And this whole thing would be autonomous, sustainable in materials and energy, able to export its high quality produce to humans and land. It will be profitable even at small scales of a few hundred units per few square kilometers, because you could be farming food there. And space is not an issue because the ocean is 70% of the planet. And concentrating the removed carbon in heaps of seaweed biomass in the deep sea floor would not interfere with the oxygen consumption. So this is all feasible and can be done, right? I won't go. This is just to show you what the spaces that we have. You have the huge spaces for sequestering this carbon. And then, you hear that, oh my God, the deep sea environment is so sensitive and we don't want to disturb it and so on. Yeah, but these are only certain parts, the ones marked with red. These are the places where you have interesting fauna and flora on the deep sea, right? But these large areas in between, they're just desert. There's nothing there, right? And then the other advantage is that you've heard of all this plastic floating in the ocean.
Yeah.
If we were to grow the sargassum in those plastic garbage dumps, right? This is this Great Pacific Garbage Patch of the United States. If we grow the sargassum here, then that sargassum would also collect the plastic and we would dump it with the sargassum on the deep sea floor. So we would also be taking this thing out of the system, the plastic. Win-win, no? So now what I'm saying is that this type of aqua farming will be analogous to the networks of irrigation canals and land that were commenced over 5,000 years ago and continue to be built at vast scale today. Now, India has become a net exporter of wheat and rice. And 30 years ago, India was experiencing famines. Why? Because of irrigation. Right? It's the irrigation that has led to this enormous production of food in India. And similarly, if you start irrigating the oceans with nutrient-rich water, we get the similar effect. No? So aqua farming will require huge investments in infrastructure, sure. And the dimensions will be equivalent to those required for very many large cities. No? About 100,000 cubic kilometers of deep water would be required to fix 1 gigaton of carbon. So we would need to bring up huge amounts of deep water. But this would be mufti ka pani here. No, we would not be putting in any energy. We would get it for free. We just have to install the pipes, right?
And it is like a perpetual design. So
yes, perpetual flow, like irrigation canals, right? And once in place, the aqua farms would be sustainable. They would offer tremendous opportunities for innovation. The sites could have multiple uses apart from novel food generation, plastic alternatives, carbon sequestration. You have new kinds of tourism. I mean, people want to go there and live and work there, right? Because you'd be canoeing around, right? You'd be in the calmest parts of the planet, right? These are the areas that have the least effect of climate change, where we would be going, and so on, right? So we are poised on the threshold of a new way to utilize the ocean's deserts that would take pressure off currently overexploited marine ecosystems, enabling them to recover. They would also encourage buildup of megafauna stocks. So let us rise to the challenge and move into a new era, a new yug, right? Samudri yug. And the host of this meeting, Gautam Sagar, his name is Sagar, not by chance, right? For those of you who don't know, Sagar means ocean in India, in Hindi, in Sanskrit, right? So aqua farms in the ocean's deserts. And with that, I'd say thank you for your attention. That was the end of my talk.
Thank you very, very much, Victor. So I would like to take an opportunity to show a very crisp video, but there is also a few more questions. So I'd kindly request people to be there for 10 more minutes so that we can have a very, let's say, conclusive end. So if I would try to summarize, like in a very simple word, what Victor says, that we have a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere already, and we have to take it out. So just going to zero emission norm and trees will not be enough. We have to keep doing it, but we have to do more. And sargassum gives the hope because it grows even every 10 days, double. So you consume a lot of CO2 very fast. So we can also sink out what is in the atmosphere. And we have a challenging problem from the engineering side that we are working on. But today we have also from seaweed, Richard Wills. I will ask him to share recent experience from last week from his experiment from the field, what is happening. And as Victor said, it will also solve a lot of food problem, because when we have a rich water in the let's say desert, so-called, we will also be able to generate more fish there and so on. So this would be like a very simplified summary to my level that maybe I can communicate. Maybe it is not 100% absolute, as good Victor said, but just to remind you these things. And I would like to request Victor to stop sharing it, and then I would share the very nice crisp video to explain you. It is just 2 minutes video, nicely prepared by Seafields. So I will share the screen now. So so now I would like to share the screen with the sound, and I hope all of you can enjoy. So let's enjoy this video.
We've been focused on carbon dioxide emissions reduction, but actually, what are we going to do with the 1,500 plus gigatons of carbon dioxide that will persist in the atmosphere? That's our focus at Seafields, to scrub those past emissions. So Seafields started when I was contacted by Sebastian Stevens, and he sent me a link to a podcast. And in that podcast, hosted by Mar Fernandez-Mendez, who's now one of our co-founders, she interviews Dr. Victor Smetacek. And he talks of this amazing brown seaweed called Sargassum, which has loads of uses from anything from biodiesel to bioplastic. But his principal aim is to bale this Sargassum, drop it to the bottom of the ocean, and there it stays and sequesters the carbon dioxide, removing it ultimately from the atmosphere.
So I am Seafields' lead scientific advisor, and my role is basically to make sure that everything that we do is science-based, is transparent, and it's according to our latest findings. So it means that we're trying to sequester the carbon from the atmosphere and store it safely in the ocean. And so the ocean is already taking up a lot of carbon, and we're just trying to enhance that process. Seafields has conducted already preliminary studies close to Mexico, where there's a lot of Sargassum, and we tested, for example, how fast the Sargassum decomposes.
Some have been absorbing from the atmosphere, from the water, to basically sunk down.
How easy it is to track the Sargassum in the water when it's floating, and for that we used drones. We also tested if we can identify how healthy the Sargassum is. And we also try to start processing the Sargassum and see how to wrap it in order to bale it and sink it.
So the first step is to go offshore from Cape Verde, where we'll have a pilot farm. Then in the spring of 2023, we'll start deploying pipes in our eventual location in the middle of the Atlantic. You can't underestimate the challenge of building something like this in the middle of the ocean. The oceans are, by default, salty, corrosive, windy, wavy. Incredibly challenging environments. So we had to engineer this in such a way that it's very easy to fix things if something goes wrong. But we're definitely up to the challenge, and we've got the right team to achieve that.
My name is Richard Wells, and I am a farmer, and my role within Seafields is to work out the operations and logistics of making the seaweed farm a reality in the mid-ocean. So we've got barriers that we'll be using to hold the seaweed in. We'll also be using drones to track the seaweed from above, so we'll be able to harvest any stuff that escapes.
Sargassum is actually an amazing seaweed because it can grow floating during its entire life cycle, so you don't need any substrate to actually grow it. And the second one is that it's growing super fast, and also it has a very high carbon to nutrient ratio, which means it's super efficient. So it can take up a lot of carbon with very little nutrients.
And actually what we hope to achieve beyond just the gigaton per annum that we'll be sequestering is to inspire an entire industry of Sargassum aquafarmers, so that scale of 1 gigaton is actually far greater because other people are helping us to also remove past emissions. If you want to get involved and find out more about Seafields, visit us at www.seafields.eco. We're on the usual social media sites, so please come and follow us. We're always looking for investors, partners, collaborators. So if you think you can help us in any way, please do reach out.